we're finally here in
I
person.
I know. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
You look good. You got your sneakers, you got your shoes, you got your moment.
I'm wearing pants with a belt. This is a big deal.
Pants with a belt. You had a child or more?
Only one child.
You had a
pandemic,
child.
yes.
Okay, it's hard to keep up.
Yes.
How
That's
you-
a second child, our son.
Okay, so there was another child.
There wasn't a child, but that child was pre-pandemic.
But the first time I interviewed you, there was the first child, maybe.
The first child, yes. That's correct.
I learned I keep tabs on my straight friends by the children.
Yes.
That's how I know. I was
That's
like,
fair.
remember when you had your first child? And then very different. So what's going on in your brain right now? You're sending these newsletters out. What are all the things you're doing? First, architect it out. You got your newsletter, you got your book that you announced today. Thank you for announcing it on the day of your Manny's event. Very good. And you have your Pod Save America. So what's a day in the life of Dan Pfeiffer these days?
Day in the life of Dan Pfeiffer is I wake up very early with my now 2 children. I do my main sort of life activities, professional work is Pod Save America, my newsletter, The Message Box. I write a couple times a week. And what I've been doing throughout the last year of the pandemic is writing a book at very strange hours of the day when my children are sleeping called Battling the Big Lie, How Fox, Facebook, and the MAGA media are destroying America. It comes out on June 7th. We announced it today. It is about, thank you.
Woo, come on, give it that a new book.
Yeah. What it's about is how right-wing disinformation and propaganda works, how Roger Ailes, Steve Bannon, a bunch of billionaires you've never heard of, and Donald Trump have built what I sort of call the MAGA megaphone, which is the whole apparatus of Fox, Breitbart, everything in between, and how that's become the most powerful weapon in all of American politics, and what Democrats, the media itself, and all of us can do to fight back. Because I feel if we don't solve this problem, then almost nothing else matters. We can have a gazillion debates about what our slogan should be, what we should say, but we have to come to terms with the fact that no one is hearing what we're saying. It is being drowned out. The conversation topics are being picked by some of the worst people on the planet. And we got to figure out how to solve that problem. So that's what this book is about. Comes out June 7th, Battling the Big Lie. You can pre-order it now. If you pre-order it, I'm more than happy to sign it. But if you go to the website, battlingthebiglie.com, upload your proof of purchase, I'll send you a signed book plate.
And we can do, another round of applause for that. And we can do a book talk here. And
yes, of course. Yes. Trying to slip this book in between variants. So
very good. I was reading the news today, the poo news, and I was like, no, I don't want to know. Don't tell me about what's in the sewage because I'm having a good time. I'm gonna keep it that way. How many of you get the message box, Dan's newsletter? Some.
Well, thank you.
Some. How many of you listen to Pod Save America? Okay, more people. Awesome. Amazing. How many of you have 2 children? Okay, fewer people.
Yes.
So we're going to talk for 30, 45,
Sure.
and then we'll open up to audience Q&A
Sure.
as well. The original purpose of this talk was, I think it was in the winter, the dead of winter, and we weren't sure if infrastructure was going to get passed. We weren't sure if Build Back Better was going to get passed. It kept kind of stalling back and forth, and I don't even remember. There was all this drama, and Nancy kept wanting to do votes and then said, we're going to do a vote. And then the vote didn't happen and we weren't sure. And I was like, what the fuck is going on in our Congress? And then I was like, Dan, can you help explain? And you said, sure, I'd be happy to. So here we are now in March. And I guess I do want to kind of ask that question though. Can you first, what the fuck is actually going on in Congress?
It's a very strange time in Congress because in a weird way, Congress has been kind of functional. They passed this big infrastructure bill, which is a big deal. They have passed aid for Ukraine, and they actually have an actual spending bill to fund the government for the first time in the president's term. There have been some other bipartisan things here. What Congress is not good at, and it's not been successful at, are the things that we all thought we were electing Democrats to give us. And that is a problem that is embodied by 2 people, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who are doing one of 2 things, either blocking changes to the filibuster, which would allow us to pass voting rights, a minimum wage, even if Joe Manchin doesn't support a $15 minimum wage, he does support an $11 minimum wage, but you need, the filibuster blocks that, and stopping climate, jobs, childcare, paid leave, all the other things that were in the Build Back Better agenda, which you don't need 60 votes for, but you do need 50 votes. And Joe Manchin has been quite difficult.
So do you feel like God is kind of playing a joke on us? Is that your read? That wasn't a real question. Let's talk about the two people, because they are the two people that occupy the most attention in this. And I'm sure this is probably a pretty well-educated audience on this topic, but let's just go one by one. Why are Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema not aligning themselves with other Democrats who also are in tough states? I mean, Mark Kelly is Kyrsten Sinema's, senator as well, and he seems to have a different tack. So first, let's start with Kyrsten Sinema, because she seems more complicated to me.
Yeah, let's actually, can I start with Manchin, just because I think that's easier? Is that
yes.
Okay? Okay, thank you. I know this is your house. It's named
I'm surprised
after you.
that you want to go with the easy one first.
Well, because I think it helps explain why Kyrsten Sinema's position is so weird.
And your job is, I think, to explain democratic politics to the whole world. So, okay, go ahead.
Okay. So from a purely raw politics position, what Joe Manchin is doing makes complete sense. Joe Manchin is in a state, when you say tough states, Joe Manchin is a state that Donald Trump won by 39 points. It is one of the most Republican states in the entire country. It is an absolute miracle that Joe Manchin is in the United States Senate and was reelected as recently as 3 years ago. It is an absolute miracle. So in order for him to survive, he has to seem to the people of West Virginia like he is opposing Democrats in lots of ways. When Democrats were in the minority, Joe Manchin would find places to disagree, but on the most core issues, he would be there. He was always a vote to stop repeal of the Affordable Care Act. When there was a tough nomination, particularly for a Supreme Court justice or a judge, he was usually there. But he would find places to do it. That is not how it's borne out here in this period of time. Now, the only reason why Joe Manchin's position doesn't make complete sense is, and Joe Manchin may be the only person who doesn't realize this, but this is his last term in the Senate. He is not going to win again. It doesn't matter how many bills he opposes. West Virginia is getting more Republican, and he only won in 2018 because it was a great Democratic year. He was running against a complete Yahoo who was all tied up with Purdue Pharma and the opioid industry in West Virginia. And there was a couple third-party candidates who ensured that he could win with less than 50% of the vote. The odds that those things all come around in 2024 when he's up again, and he's will be running in a presidential election year, a very bad year. But you're just saying he is more conservative than other Democrats, and his political incentives are to oppose Democrats.
Okay, 2 follow-up questions on Joe Manchin. How did he win? So what is the secret special sassy sauce about Joe Manchin that gets him to win in a plus 39 state? And then you said he's the only one that doesn't know that he's going to lose. How does he not know that?
I think
why is he making these calls to protect his seat? Does he think his seat is safe and this is like a survival thing?
I think he wants to run, and he wants to preserve the option to run and win again. But we should also remember there are lots of Democrats, and I have worked for some of them who have represented the past red states, who are personally way more progressive than their state will allow. And as soon as they either retire or they decide they're not going to run again or they lose, all of a sudden they're like for everything, right? A whole bunch of them lost in 2004 and all of a sudden we're completely fine with gay marriage after that, right? That is not Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is genuinely a conservative Democrat in a state with a long history of conservative Democrats. And he won, and he is very popular in a state. He does his politics very well. He needed everything to go right in a phenomenal Democratic year to win, and he did barely, right?
Okay, so that's why he won, and he's doing these things because he is conservative, and because he wants the option to win again. Yeah. Okay, I have more questions about Joe Manchin, but I also feel like I kind of understand that a little bit. So let's move on to Kyrsten Sinema.
I don't have a fucking clue. I don't.
But why though? But what do you think it is? Ro Khanna was here 2 nights ago. I don't know, 2 nights ago. And Jamie Raskin was here the day before that. And I asked both of them, I was like, straw poll, what's going on? And they both were like, we don't know, we're confused. So how is that possible?
I don't think from my understanding, she doesn't talk to a lot of Democrats. Her best friends in the Senate, the ones she hangs out with, are Republicans, there are plenty, despite you would think, people who are bipartisan friendship. So that in and of itself is not a damning thing. I cannot make a credible, even argument within the general universe of credible about why this is good politics for her. This is a purple state that is getting bluer. She has to win a Democratic primary in 2024. And if you anger all the Democrats and you drive your approval rating into the teens among Democrats, which she has done, then she will not win a primary. And the idea, this is not Connecticut in 2004, where Joe Lieberman lost a primary, was able to run as an independent. This is not Alaska in 2010, when I think it was 10, when Lisa Murkowski lost a primary and then ran as a write-in candidate.
Which honestly is got to be the most badass thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Those are smaller states, very different states. This is, if she loses this primary, that is it. That is over for her. And she probably will lose the primary. So I think she has developed in her a political persona of bizarre contrarianism. And I think it is a complete misreading of the history of that state, where she tries to explain it as John McCain, the maverick, Barry Goldwater, sort of ran against his own party. And that's sort of like what Arizona likes. Her polling would suggest that she is quite wrong about what Arizona likes. And she is very, I think, instinctual, which is very strange for a former Green Party member, but she is instinctually pro corporation. She opposes Medicare drug negotiation. Joe Manchin, for all of his conservative whatever, would raise taxes on corporations tomorrow. The problem with that, the only person opposing that is Kyrsten Sinema, the only Democrat opposing that.
Okay.
It's very frustrating.
Yes. Okay. I feel like we're all sitting out here and we're like, what is going on, y'all? We had a moment. We're like, because remember, we had 12 or 14 potential pickup seats, depending on who you asked, for 2020 in the Senate. And there were tons of people that were more likely to win that didn't. And then remember, we had to win both Georgia special election seats, which was the first time in a gajillion years that there were two special elections in one state, which only happened for a variety of reasons. But we had to win both of them. And we did. We did the impossible. You know what I mean? Like when you see that action movie and it's like there's just no way that Superman's gonna get to her in time and then also save the other burning person. And then he does, and you're like, how do you do that? That is what happened. And then they're not even fucking it up for us. So what do we? So if you were Joe Biden, which you're not yet, but
Not
let's
yet.
say
He has some years on me. Yes.
How would you? But you were advising the former Democratic president Barack Obama. So if you were in the chair now and you're like, all right, here's how we need to get through to them to bring them to our side, what would you advise President Biden to do or say? And is there a typewriter in the corner? What is happening? It's the door. Okay.
No. The typewriter would be weird. So I would say two things to President Biden. One is stop talking about, first, the first thing is Build Back Better, as we all understand it, is dead. Long live something that looks kind of like Build Back Better, but has a different name and a better brand that is focused around costs and inflation and climate. Don't talk about it. Joe Biden's goal should be to be as far away from Congress as possible up until the moment Congress sends him a bill for him to sign. And so no more events talking about it, no more bring down the 19 members to meet with you in the office. You are the commander in chief, you're not the legislator in chief, you're president, you're not prime minister. And you're going to have more success if this is happening outside of the clique lights of intense focus. Private conversations with Joe Manchin, figure out what he's for. Private conversations with Kyrsten Sinema to see where the Venn diagram of weirdness, there is some overlap. And the progressives will come along with it because it is the only train leaving station. But what I would do is I would frame it entirely around jobs, inflation, and climate change. And this all, and that all works together because, the thing I would add is I would, as an inducement, offer something. I know Joe Manchin has decided, for the reasons that make zero sense, to oppose the extension of the child tax credit, but something that kind of looks like the child tax credit that puts money in people's pocket to help deal with increased cost of gas and groceries.
And you would not, and there's no strategy to get Mitt Romney across the line or none of that,
No.
because some of them did vote for infrastructure and voted to impeach Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
But that's just
Well,
dead on arrival strategy.
Yeah, I think that is dead on arrival. Republicans will hang together, especially this close to an election.
Does it make you, so the overarching question I wanted us to think about this whole time is Congress broken? And there are, if you were to do a list on one side, there are lots of arguments to say it's not, right? Massive COVID spending bill, massive infrastructure bill, historic, $18 billion on Ukrainian relief, like that. A spending bill, reformed the postal service, I think last week. VAWA just got reauthorized. I mean, there's actually a lot of arguments to be made that a lot of stuff is getting done. On the other side, you make this argument that like one or two people, Democrats, are stopping us from getting our larger agenda done, and we can't find one Republican to vote on our side. Oh, I get snaps? Wow, that's great. Where do you, that equation, where are you on that equation?
I think it's not just Congress. I think America is largely incapable of doing big controversial things. Like we have a system, an American government system that is built on compromise. That's what the filibuster is for. That is why you need 2/3 of Congress to 2/3 of the Senate to remove a president who commits an obvious crime on tape. And that kind of sort of worked when there was ideological diversity within the parties, right? Where you could put together these coalitions of conservative Democrats and conservative Republicans, or Rockefeller Republicans and liberal Democrats to do things, and you could get to the margins you need to pass stuff. Now, there is no ideological diversity in the parties anymore. I mean, Mitt Romney is the most, with possible exception of Susan Collins, most liberal Republican, and he is someone who ran for president 10 years ago on a platform as a serious, hard right, anti-immigration conservative. That is just how the parties. Democrats have more ideological diversity. We have Joe Manchin, but even then, the amount of diversity within the party, like when I went to the White House with President Obama, the 59 Democratic senators who were there when we started included senators from the Democrats from the Dakotas, one from Montana, one from Alaska, two from Arkansas. We mean just everywhere, right? Just in huge diversity, regional, ideological in there. That doesn't exist anymore. When things get done, they get done and they can only get done big things, right? As important as that infrastructure bill is, and it is a tremendous accomplishment that actually validates a lot of what Joe Biden said he could accomplish as president. But all we are doing there is repairing broken roads. It is not like no one should get an award for, the planet is burning here, right? And we're fixing potholes, and that counts as achievement. So that I think speaks to the difficulty of our system. And this has been a thing that I think Americans have an instinctual desire for divided government, but divided government means you can't get anything done.
Do you think that we'll ever get back to that place that the electoral map that you inherited, which wasn't that long ago, that did have more diversity of Democrats in particular? And the second question is, they're both hard questions to answer. That's why I'm pairing them. What do you think that there could be a big bill, a kind of transformational piece of legislation passed between now and the midterms? And if so, what would it be?
I do not think we will ever get back to a point where you have lots of states that vote one way in a presidential election, elect senators from the other state. There are almost none in Congress now. There are, we have Susan Collins, and then there are a couple and there's like Ron Johnson in Wisconsin and the Pennsylvania seat, very, very few. And I don't think that's going to change. America has been on an inexorable path towards polarization. But I think, and I've felt very strongly about it, is what we have to do is adjust our political system to reflect that. Because if we want to get things done, we should make it easier for there to be majority rule in this country. And right now, that seems great if you are a progressive, because there is a progressive majority in this country. That majority has been growing with every single election.
But also because we're right.
Yeah, we were absolutely right. But we would have to be prepared for the fact that there will be a time at some point in history where we don't have that majority and things that we don't like will pass. But I would rather people who are in power have to run on the things they did than being able to stop people from doing things and then blame the other party for not getting anything done, which is what happened in Obama. It is what is headed in Biden's direction right now. Because we are talking about mansion cinema, and we should talk about it because I imagine we're an entirely or mostly progressive audience here. We're trying to figure out what works in the Democratic Party, but we cannot forget that the main blocker to almost everything we want to do, including voting rights, is zero Republicans are willing to do anything. They're using a legislative trick from the Jim Crow era to block something that a large majority of Americans supported, a majority of senators support. And while we should figure out what's wrong in our own house, we can't forget who is the true impediment to progress here.
Yeah, I'm like not sure if I'm supposed to clap or like cry. I don't know. Like moment of silence for American politics. Because as you said that, I was hoping you would say yes, Manny. There is a way.
Well,
I wasn't. Then you'd say no, Manny. There isn't a way. But also, it's 2022. Honestly, nothing surprises me anymore.
I do not. I think in terms, can this Congress pass something significant by midterms? Yes. What Joe Manchin said after the State of the Union that he was open to was, and this is not anything anyone would have designed, but what he would do is he would raise taxes on corporations and the wealthy. He would allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices, which in addition to saving caps insulin prices and saves money for consumers, it saves a ton of money for the government, which is whether it's the VA, the Department of Defense, HHS is all paying extreme, absurd prescription drug prices. He would take that money, he would give half of it to deficit reduction, which makes zero sense. I want to be very clear on that point. It is an incredibly stupid thing to do. He would take the other half of that money and spend it on climate. And if you did that, if you passed prescription drug negotiation and raised taxes and spent all that money on climate, that would be a transformational piece of legislation that would do a lot to save the planet and help people live, which would be great. There are many roadblocks between here and there. Kyrsten Sinema is one of them on prescription drugs. But if you can find a way to do something, and we absolutely have to, I think it is not sufficient to flipping the narrative for the midterms. But if we have the trifecta and we are unable to do anything on climate in a world in which, given demographic trends, we may not have the Senate again for 10 years, like we have to do it right now.
Okay, where's the speaker? Where did she go? Is she still over there? I don't see her. Oh, there she is. Where is she? She's hiding. Oh, usually this is the point where I point to Nancy Pelosi. Can you please bring the speaker closer? And I say, how you think she's doing? Take a sip of beer. Yeah, keep in mind, you don't have to bring her all the way here. Goddamn. But usually it's like we just talked about him, Biden. Now we're going to her. How's she doing?
Good.
Yeah. Do you think she should be speaker in 2 years?
Is it the choice speaker of minority leader? Then yes, speaker.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, just seeing if I could slip by with that one. Look, I don't know whether it's 2 years, but sooner rather than later, Democrats need a change in leadership across the board.
You know, she's literally watching you right now.
I'm sure. I love Nancy Pelosi.
She does not mess around. Nancy Pelosi does not fuck around.
She knows that. And if she manages to keep the House in this environment with this margins.
Is it possible? Be honest with this guy.
I think that is Democrats have it would be one of the most unprecedented political outcomes in recent memory. It's just now we have I would say that just given where Biden's approval ratings are, where the mood of the country is, where the generic ballot is. But what I will say is we are so much better positioned to have even if it's a small shot to do that because of how redistricting played out. There are actually going to be more seats that Joe Biden won in the 2022 election than there were in the 2020 election. Now,
okay, glimmer of hope,
yeah,
glimmer of hope. Love to hear it.
There was a belief that Republicans would net a dozen seats, right? More than they needed to reclaim the majority, just that would become safe Republican seats. That did not happen. Now, there are a whole bunch of seats that where Joe Biden won the district, but barely. And so that was a better year than this year, but we are in the game. And that's also what's also really incredible, helpful about that over the long term is after both the last two redistrictings, it took Democrats forever to get the seats back because we were at such a disadvantage in the maps. There was a Republican tilt to the House. You know, Nate Cohn and Nate Silver and all these other Dave Wasserman, these sort of experts look at it and think that the Republican advantage in the House is dramatically narrowed over the course of this process. And so if we were to lose it this time, we won't be in a position, we won't need some giant wave like 2006, 2018 to get it back. You'd be in the game sort of every year.
And which Democrat in Congress should be the next speaker? Dan.
I do not. I'm going to tell you the answer.
I expect nothing less from you. I think this is the fourth or fifth time we've done this.
Yes.
So at this point, you know that I'm going to keep asking.
Yeah, you're not going to let me get out of this.
No.
So if I were to here's what I'd say. If the Democrats keep the House, Nancy Pelosi should be speaker again, because that will be a phenomenal achievement. But I think the person to transition to, if I was to pick any Democrat for that role, it would be Pramila Jayapal.
Whoa. We got a curveball. Okay, talk to me.
I think she is the future of the party. She's an incredibly smart, practical progressive who knows how to build coalitions and work with people to get things done. She is the person who helped ensure that we could at least get this infrastructure bill done by working with centrists and others and being willing to put her credibility on the line after we lost in Virginia to try to get to sort of move away from this. We were in a position where this is when right by the time we first scheduled this event, centrists weren't going to vote for the Build Back Better bill and progressives weren't going to vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and you were sort of stuck. And she sort of looked at them and said, we need success beget success. Now that hasn't happened yet, but they have accomplished, this Congress has something to run on because she was able to help figure that out. So I think she's incredibly talented.
But didn't she vote against the infrastructure bill herself?
The first time, but then when they actually passed it, she voted for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Pramila Jayapal.
No.
Awesome. Interesting. I was going to ask you like Connor Lamb or AOC, who's the future of the party, but you've answered it already.
Yeah. It's not always a binary choice.
Well, it is if there's just one speaker's gavel.
That's true. So yes. The future of the party doesn't always have to be the speaker.
And in general, anything else you want to see on how the House is doing these days? I mean, we're hearing a lot about the Senate. The House did pass. Well, no, the Senate passed I'm not really sure what it means. Does anyone know what it means? The whole daytime saving thing? I'm like, am I going to get more sleep, less sleep?
It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. They weren't paying attention. This is what happens when you take a bunch of really, really old people and you make them vote every hour on the hour for like 36 straight hours. Is Marco Rubio made a unanimous consent request. I don't think anyone knew what he was voting on. No one had the energy to stop him, but it doesn't matter because the House is not going to pass it.
Why not? It sounded kind of cool.
This is something that my podcast co-host John Lemon feels very strongly about. My only view on daylight savings time is it is an incredibly cruel thing to do to parents of young children, because you can't explain to a 3-year-old why 6 o'clock is now 5 o'clock, and that means you have to stay in bed. So
it was last week, and there was a particularly fun, very late night gay party that happened. And I think it meant that everyone got even less sleep. So I think it's both cruel to parents and to gay people.
Yes. I used to think it was great when I worked on campaigns, because that extra hour of sleep used to always be the weekend before the election.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Love. Yeah. And how do you think Joe Biden's doing? I mean, you talked a lot about him in the run up. You've discussed him a lot. He's been president for 2 years now. I don't know. I don't know what day it is.
It's about 15 months, I think.
Okay, not even close to a year and a half.
Yes.
But like, how would you say he's doing? What would your report card be on Joe Biden? Better than expected? Just as expected? Honey, we need some work.
I think better than expected against a much harder set of crises than I think anyone imagined.
Which crises?
I think.
Oh, other than the obvious one.
Yeah, I mean, just you have if you think back to take the day after. I was going to say the day after the Georgia election, but the Georgia election was January 5th.
Yeah, that was a bummer.
So let's do the evening of January 5th, right?
Which was not a bummer.
Not a bummer. That was great. But you would sort of say,
We had this thing, poopsicle, popsicle. That was a poopsicle. No, that was a popsicle.
yes, that's a popsicle. The next day was a popsicle. Yes.
100% poopsicle the next day.
But if you were to say, if you were to step back from what we thought we could get done, you were just to say, after the election, Joe Biden, you're going to have 50 senators. Joe Manchin is going to be one of them. The Republican Party is going to convince itself that you are an illegitimate president. 75 to 80% of the voters are going to agree with that sentiment. The former president will lead a violent insurrection to try to stop you from getting sworn in. And most of his party and half of the House will support that effort and go along with it. And then you're going to pass a $2 trillion COVID relief plan that will begin the process of having child poverty in this country. You're going to get 19 Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, to vote for $1 trillion infrastructure bill that includes some important investments in green energy. And you're going to confirm the most judges to federal courts of any president in their first year in history. You're going to have an opportunity to put the first Black woman on the Supreme Court. You're going to get all of that done with that environment. You'd say, well, that I would take that right there. But we believed that we could get so much more done, and we wanted to get more done, and we should get more done, and we did. Now, I think he had to do all that against a resurgent coronavirus, where I think we thought, maybe not, but all of us were naive, that we're going to get vaccinated. Most of our neighbors and around this country would also get vaccinated. We would have returned to normal a summer ago. Things would have been.
Did you have a hot girl summer?
I did. No.
I'm trying to imagine it.
It's not. It's be a really pretty lame picture, is my guess. I mean, no. The answer to that is no. Yes.
Can you?
Because when I got vaccinated I got my first shot 2 weeks after my son was born. So it was newborn summer. It was loud newborn summer in my house. And then it was Delta, and then it was Omicron. So you're dealing with all of that. Russia, 40-year high in inflation, like all of that. I mean, has that taken a tremendous toll? Can I say, like, you could have, I could not, you can always say you can do this better, you can do that better. I think he has been, to the extent there could be any critique at all, is that at times he has allowed it to seem like he is watching these events instead of in command of them. I think that has been very different this year as it relates to how to deal with Russia. He has been, and I think he learned some lessons from how the latter half of the pandemic played out, which is and what happened in Afghanistan is where he was in the run up, he was omnipresent in the media, telling people what was going to happen, being strong about it, showing, because the American public, in my experience, is relatively forgiving about your ability to solve every problem, but they sure as hell want to see you trying to solve it. And so that is why his numbers have gone up a little bit. His approval rating on how to handle this crisis has gone up because people see him doing the stuff. I think they've done a very good job with it. I mean, he's dealing with a land war in Europe that was not on the bingo card a year ago, right?
Something you just said is interesting to me. What do you think it is about Americans that we like to see our symbolic individual leader show us that they're trying to solve a problem? What do you think is about our sensibilities that, because I agree with you, and I think he's handled Ukraine very well. I feel like he has a plan, he's working on it. So what is that about?
Because the American presidency is, I think, almost unique in the world for how it is viewed by its public. The American president is head of government, but also head of state, right? He or she is the king or queen of England and the prime minister. There is a tremendous amount of sort of pop culture rendering, huge biographies. We think of, all these, there are stories. I mean, the American story is often, and I think incorrectly, told through the successes and failures of presidents. And it has given the American public a misperception of how much power the president actually has. And why can't you just why isn't Joe Biden twisting arms with Joe Manchin to make him do this? Isn't that what Lyndon Johnson did? I saw that in a movie with Bryan Cranston, right? It's not how it really works. But I think because we put this president on sort of this pedestal that in times of crisis, we expect them to be there for us. It is Reagan in his speech about the Challenger. It is Bill Clinton in his speech after the Oklahoma City bombing. It's even George W. Bush with the bullhorn. And when there is crisis, I think people are willing to, it's not going to change how they vote come November, but want to hear from their president. I remember traveling many times with President Obama to visit natural disaster sites, hurricanes, tornadoes, some of them in the reddest parts of the country, right? Places like Oklahoma, rural Missouri, and people who definitely did not vote for Barack Obama, did not like Barack Obama, probably had a lot of unkind things to say about Barack Obama, are incredibly appreciative to see the president come to their community in that moment and seem to be trying to help. And I think that's one of the things that made people so insane about Donald Trump was he never even tried to do, he didn't care for any, the president's supposed to be in charge of everyone, right? Donald Trump was only the president for people who voted for him, and that was very different.
I wonder, thank you for explaining that, and you do it so well. You should do this for a living. I wonder how much of it too is, I thought about this a lot because I've had the privilege of traveling outside the country a fair amount and living in other countries. And so comparing what it feels like in other places to this place. And being American is actually a profoundly lonely experience. You know, people come here from all over the world, oftentimes with nothing, oftentimes without their families, all alone. It's a rat race kind of country. You're supposed to make a lot of money somehow. You're supposed to get a great education somehow. You're supposed to, you know, make it. We have these giant cities, tiny apartments, all these problems. And it is a country where you are supposed to somehow figure out how to get it done without a whole lot of help. And if you do, then you've achieved the American dream. A lot of other countries don't seem to have that same feeling. There's much more feeling of we're all in this together. We're all going to do it together. We'll take care of you. Don't worry. We got you. America, it's a sink or swim, more of a sink or swim type of environment. So I wonder if the president is also some kind of salve to people. It's like they represent some kind of community, some kind of way to feel connected.
I think this is changing somewhat in recent years, but Americans are addicted to their own mythology, right? We came to this country and we made it and we built it up from the ground up, and we fought in world wars, and we did this, and with the spirit of independence, and we overthrew the British, and we threw tea into the harbor. And which is why, you have this, there is this independent, anti-government, fear of authority strain in America. It's like embodied in Horatio Alger stories. It's about bringing you up from your bootstraps, and this sort of sense of American exceptionalism. Is why there are a lot of American, particularly policymakers, who think the solution to every problem in the world is the American military. Now, there's very limited evidence that ends out well for lots of people, but I think we have this sort of addiction to our own mythology of American exceptionalism. And we are this exceptional, amazing country that we put all this, sort of responsibility on, that is therefore embodied in the president. Now, that version of history erases everything else, right? That is a story told from the people who had political power in this country at any given juncture. It erases people who lived on this land before us, the people who were brought here against their will, subjugate, all of that, which is actually sort of the debate that's now playing out in American education, right? It's about why to truly wrestle with the real version of America is to have some pretty uncomfortable conversations. And that's why now the sort of solution in some parts of the country is to just ban talking about those things or ban the books that include those things.
I'm curious to ask in this room, and please be honest with yourself and with me, how many people here, raise your hand, feel like they believe, they buy into somewhere inside themselves the American myth, the American story? Not the part of like, you got to make it here, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, all that stuff. Okay, so about like 40, 50%. I feel like I do. I still feel like I want to be successful because I'm an American, and that's what Americans do.
But I mean, let me kind of fill the vacuum here.
If you want to.
Sure. I think there is,
and by the way, we're going to go to audience Q&A in about I have like one or two more questions. That's all I got.
I think that the person, this is probably an unsurprising answer, that I have found who talks most persuasively and thoughtfully about this question is Barack Obama, right? And he writes about that in his speech, which is, he is a true believer in what this country can be, but he thinks the only way you can do that is to be honest with what it has been. And he writes, his speech he gave in Selma in 2015 on the anniversary of the Bloody Sunday March. really gets into this. He writes about it a lot in his book. And the thing that I think so many, and this has become very hard for Democrats, particularly in recent years, as we have had a national conversation about structural racism, which is how can I reconcile my belief that this is an amazing, important country that truly is the best place in the world to live with all of the horrible things that have happened and still happen here.
And I just have to say, it does feel like the critique that we get on the left from the right is that all we want to do is shit on America, and we're not appreciating all that it's about, how amazing the country is, which I think is unfair.
Yeah.
Because, I'm the child of an immigrant, my father, and I've seen how being in America has really changed his life. And I think we can, but somehow in the messaging, we get pigeonholed as the people that all we want to do is, cancel everyone else and police language and talk about how shitty everything is. And we're not, patriotic. How do we change that?
I think this is what Barack Obama would say, which is, and this is how he thinks about it, is there is nothing more patriotic than trying to make your country better, right? That trying to, this is, he uses the language wrong. The thing about the moral arc of the dispense for justice, that is the ultimate patriot. It is not patriotic to pretend like your country is better than it was before, to run away from problems. The true patriots are the people who marched in the civil rights movement, the people who marched for women's suffrage, people who marched for workers' rights, gay rights, everything. Like, that's patriotism. And that is why he's president, because he gave that speech at the 2004 convention about the red states and blue states. That is about, and he said in that speech, and that everyone came to, is that only in this country is my story possible. Here you have the son of a Kenyan immigrant, a white woman from Kansas, who spent time on government assistance growing up, raised by a single mom because his dad left him before he ever really knew him. And the fact that he could succeed here doesn't mean the country's perfect, but it means that we have the opportunity for success. And so framing it that the true patriots are the people who marched after the murder of George Floyd. That is true patriotism. And the people who tried to stop that's not patriotic. That's not in American values.
What was your last text message to Barack Obama?
I do not text with Barack Obama. No.
But you communicate.
Yeah, I do communicate with him.
And how's she doing?
How's he doing? He's doing great. He's doing great.
I can't wait for my interview
interview,
President Obama. He is not going to know what hit him.
He does. He has COVID right now. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he announced.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've been too busy preparing for this conversation.
Yes, he's vaxxed and boosted and a little scratchy throat, but otherwise fine.
Okay, second to last question. Angelina, can you please bring our vice president closer to us? Now, I swear, I don't know why her cardboard cutout is so much smaller than the rest, but which is not fair. And what is going on with our vice president? There's all this mishigas coming out that things aren't going well. You are not hearing a lot about her. There was a lot of excitement about having her as our vice president, but it seems something seems to have gotten lost. So what is your kind of perception of what's happening with the vice president? And, what do you think the next couple of years should hold or will hold for her?
I mean, we've never had a vice president in this situation. Obviously, first woman vice president, first Black vice president, first Indian American vice president, completely unique situation. But it's also unique from a political perspective, which is the last two vice presidents we have, and this is somewhat ironic now, but were presumed for the entire 8 years that they were never going to run for president. Dick Cheney was not going to run. I worked in the White House with Joe Biden every day for 6 years. Did not think he was going to run for president. Turns out I was wrong. He did it quite well. But that was sort of the assumption. Not only is Kamala Harris likely to believed to be someone who is going to run for president, not just at some point in the future, there's a very good chance Joe Biden's not going to run, and she's going to be the front runner for the Democratic nomination next year. And so the amount, no vice president ever had this amount of scrutiny. When you layer onto that the sort of clearly misogynistic and racist tropes that dominate so much of political coverage and how we think about our leaders, particularly in the White House, that were so manifest in her presidential campaign in 2020, you sort of end up with a situation. Does that mean she has done everything perfectly? No, there's obviously been a lot of turnover in that staff, but most people pay zero attention to the vice president. She's getting sort of presidential level scrutiny. I think it takes a little bit of time to figure out, and we went through this with the current president, just like what everyone is doing and how to maximize talents. And maybe that has taken longer than you would think. It's hard to know. It's very hard to know as someone who worked in that building and then would read accounts of what's happening in that building and realize that there was very little relationship between the two, what the real story is. But I think what will be whether she's going to run for president in 2024 or at some other point in the future is to have some more, sort of specific things that are hers that she can sort of do completely. Like Joe Biden had a very specific set of policies that Barack Obama gave him.
Why is it Joe not?
Well, she has. She has voting rights. She has dealing with the Golden Triangle countries around immigration. She has gotten very hard issues. I mean, there were no.
Yeah, come on, give her a good one.
Yeah.
Give her like one. Give her one win. Give her like I don't know. Give her just.
You know what? Michelle Obama would say that's really hard too. Yes.
A couple poopsicles, a couple popsicles.
Yeah.
Come on.
She's
got the border. That's hard.
Yeah, she's gotten some very hard issues, but there honestly.
I'd be pissed if someone's like, here's what I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna give you voting rights in the border.
Yeah. No,
I'd be
it's
like,
not.
why are you trying to be memeing me?
Yeah. But the one thing that I know from working there is there are like all the easy shit gets done before it gets to the West Wing. And so there's no like, you know what? Here's some like, what would the easy issue be?
The accusation is that she's being set up to fail. Do you think that's true?
I do not think that's true.
Because that would be silly.
That I can't even.
Why
imagine,
would you even do that?
I can't imagine whose purpose that would serve. Joe Biden, he needs his vice president to be successful and popular and helpful because you can't be everywhere at once. It was very helpful for Barack Obama that Joe Biden was very popular with some voters that Barack Obama was not. And so there were parts of the country in tough elections in 2010 and 2014 where Joe Biden was campaigning everywhere, where Barack Obama would not have been as helpful as Joe Biden would be. Joe Biden can very much use that with a lot of the voters who very much love Kamala Harris and were so excited about her nomination. And so he wants her to succeed. I know everyone who works in the White House. Joe Biden's chief of staff was the chief of staff to the last two Democratic vice presidents before this. They want her to succeed. And so there's no one, doesn't mean everyone's doing everything right, doesn't mean everything is perfect, but I do not believe for 1 second that anyone is setting her up to fail.
All right, my last question to you is about this book, honey.
Yeah.
Just send an email. You're writing it, your book's out. I didn't even know you were doing this.
It comes out June 7th.
I know it's coming out June
No one
7th.
knew.
And you talked about what it's about, but tell me why now are you releasing a book about, disinformation and Trump and Fox and the big lie? I mean, I'm not going to critique your work. I'm sure it's wonderful. I haven't read it, but how do you feel about like people being like, I don't want to no, like, I don't want, we talked about that already.
We don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
like, what drug should people do before reading your book?
I think you
like a psychedelic or upper. What do we need? I think
you will leave the book more hopeful than when you started it, because what I want to give people is this. I think the biggest problem in America is right-wing disinformation and propaganda. It is it's everything. That's why we can't solve climate change. It's why large portions of this country won't put a piece of cloth over their face to protect themselves and their neighbors, why people won't get a shot that was developed by the president that they loved, right? So, I mean, it's insane. And until we solve it, we can do nothing else. And if we don't narrow the gap by 2024, I think we're in huge trouble. And so I want to explain it because I think after having watched this from a front row for 20 years, I think most people in Democratic politics do not really understand what it is the Republicans are doing and how they did it, how it was built, who paid for it, how they think about media, why the Democratic approach to communication and messaging is outdated and wrong. And so I want to explain what happened, what we can do about it. And that's not just like what Joe Biden and all the other cardboard cutouts can do about it here. It's like what all of us can do, because we all have the ability to fight back. So was that a mean attack on the cardboard cutouts? Or?
No, it wasn't mean. I'm just like, one day they will be real. I mean, Nancy's been here. Kamala's been here. 2 out of 4 ain't bad. A round of applause for Dan Will you indulge us with some audience Q&A? Is that all right with you? You got some time? And then you got a baby and all. Let's get some audience questions. Just raise your hand.
Like,
Go
what if I
ahead.
said no right there?
Then I would have put some more Irish music on and had everyone leave to the right hand side. Yes, go ahead.
Dan, I'm a huge fan. I love Message Box and Positive America. You have so many important ideas, and please tell me that you have a lot of important people subscribing and listening and podcasting you behind the scenes. Like, I heard you say it, and I'm like, why isn't anybody listening?
You know what? I say the same thing. No, I mean, I talk to lots of people privately. I provide advice to people where I can. There are people who read Message Box, who I communicate with about it, who are in position to make decisions.
Subscribe. Message Box is fucking awesome.
Messagebox.substack.com. You can subscribe. But it is, yes, I pass it along. Everyone who works at Positive America talks to lots and lots of people in the party. And it's just that these things they're harder than they sound in a newsletter or a podcast, getting from conception to execution. But I'm out there talking to people.
Go ahead.
What can we do as Silicon Valley folks? I'm starting to develop Twitter guys are my first investors in my fund. The Facebook guys, marketers, people. What specific granular thing can the technical people and the people with capital in Silicon Valley do to connect the movements to really push back and help defeat this scale versus?
I mean, it's a longer conversation, but I think what the larger progressive funding world has been unwilling to do is to invest in progressive content. And so, like, we got lots of liberals who, and some of them from tech, who are buying old media properties like The Atlantic and Time Magazine. We got to invest in progressive media, to people who are making videos, memes, writing, local progressive media. There's a organization called Courier News, which has 8 progressive digital sites in battleground states, some funded by some people who with relationships in tech. But to put it in perspective how far behind we are, there are 1,300 billionaire-funded right-wing local news sites going to the places where local newspapers have failed and creating innocuously named websites that's like just like one word off what the newspaper was called. And people think it's regular news, and there's 1,300 of them, and there's 8 Democratic ones. And so investing in those sorts of things. That's why I had to write the book. Sorry.
All right, we'll read the book. Graham, we're gonna get to most folks' questions. Thanks for answering them quickly and asking them quickly.
So I think my question is basically, in your opinion, what to do about the Democratic base. I think I saw going into the midterms. I think I saw polling recently from Democracy Corps, the Voter Participation Center, that said before the State of the Union, the lowest polling and approval for the president was with the Democratic base.
Yep.
It seems like, picking up on the theme of this conversation, is that there may have been some sort of like false expectations, in my opinion, about what the president could accomplish this year. If we're having the toughest problem with the Democratic base because there are these expectations that we could do all the legislative things that Joe Biden would deliver here, and here throughout his first, what did we say, 13 months, 14 months, and that disappointment is being felt most acutely or being identified by the Democratic base. And in fact, Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin have always been the ones who held that power, despite the popsicle day of electing those 2 Democratic senators from Georgia. The truth has always been that Joe Biden couldn't have ever delivered a legislative agenda that was the starry-eyed vision of the Democratic base. So the Democratic base is having this moment of disappointment. How can we change that aperture between now and November to do the things we want to do?
All right, how do we get the base back on board?
I think we have to get a couple of things done. Getting something on climate. It's not going to be what we thought it was going to be before, but something will be seen as a big deal. And confirming the Supreme Court justice is going to be a big deal. If I were to have one critique of every single person in the Democratic Party, myself included, is we did an absolutely miserable job of expectations management. Everyone kept saying, we're going to get this done, we're going to get it done. And no one had a plan to get it done. And that led to this misplaced expectations. Last thing is that we have to actually communicate with that younger base. The party has not been doing a good job of that, either in paid media or going to the sort of media outlets that the media is being consumed by the younger base. We're just continuing to do like CNN, which is seen by no one who doesn't have an AARP card. So that's sort of how we're going to get it back. But the time is ticking.
All right, and the individual in the back, yes. I'm not sure if you're wearing headphones around your head or it's just a lighter collar. Yes.
Yeah,
you mind standing up?
Sure. This is a question about compromise and how we Democrats can or should compromise more. And the background to that is we may wish to extend protection to more people and to the environment, which translates to more regulation. I just take a look at locally homelessness issues or statewide, 25 years is taken as we start the conversation about high-speed railway. And I think about climate change and I think, where are we as Democrats that never thought to go public? How do we compromise ourselves? Creating recognitions that are also making it very difficult for us to achieve our goals.
I think we have to be willing to take compromises that do not fly in the face of our values, and we have to get the best deal we possibly can. This problem we're in is we're not negotiating with Republicans, right? On the core, really big divisive issues in this country, Republicans have just said we're not going to. At the federal level, it could be it's different in different states, but we have to absolutely willing to compromise. We have to get. It's better to get something done than to be right, and so compromise it should not be a bad word. But we actually need people to compromise with, which we don't really have right now. We're compromising with ourselves, which maybe what we have to do to get something done. But we're not the problem. We're not getting the problem with minimum wage is not that we want 15 and Mitch McConnell and the Republicans want 9 and we just land at like 11.50. It's 115 and they want us to get nothing done, and therefore you can't have a compromise there.
All the way in the back. Yes. Yes.
I shared your passion for this information and studying it. So what's the one thing that we need to know to persuade others before you're looking at?
Love that question. That was a
Smart.
plant.
Yeah, that was very clever. Yes.
We planted that one, honey.
I think what every person needs to recognize is that we have agency. Everyone is most people are walking around with a phone in their pocket, which gives them a network of 150 to 300 people between your phone contacts, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else. And that when we're always like, why does the media tell this story about Joe Biden? Or why is all this bad information going around? That we have the power to correct that. We have the power to communicate with our network, right? We may have friends who are undecided about voting, people who like Joe Biden, who now like him less, and we can take it upon ourselves to use the information we have to do it. The other thing I'd say is every one of us has to stop being played for fools on social media by Republicans. We're all getting trolled. They want to anger us. They want us to respond in anger to their post so that the algorithm will mark that as engagement and show it to more people.
Do people feel like they are seeing Republican stuff on their walls? Oh, maybe no. How many people feel like they actively see Republican messaging in their social media feeds in some regular way? Raise your hand.
I see a lot of reactions to Republicans.
Yeah,
But not.
which is what they want. Yes.
Oh, but not like, because I don't see a lot of Republican stuff on my wall.
It's people who you are opting into a progressive world, right? But for people who are
I swear it's the same ringtone. Honestly,
Yes.
it's just the same one, just
But-
bobbing around.
but the people who are apolitical are going to have a greater diversity of people they follow or
Got
are
it.
friends
Okay.
with, and you're going to see different stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that political.
Yes.
All right, next question. Go ahead.
So we've been talking a lot about how Congress is super broken, but there's also a conversation about the people in Congress is really broken. So I'm wondering if you see not property in the next 5 years, but in the next 50 years, do you think there's a possibility that we change the way that we elect people? Like there's ranked choice voting, there's star voting, there's all these different opportunities, but I personally can't see an avenue to which we ever change this like big two-party system. So I'm wondering.
Is everyone hearing this question? Yeah, do we change? Are we going to be able to change how we elect people? Yeah.
I think we can change how we elect people. The problem we have is we have 50 different systems, because even though there is even really federal oversight of elections. In fact, the Federal Election Commission is basically neutered. It doesn't have the ability to do anything, even on its best day, but now particularly. I think we can make reforms, both that make it easier for people to vote, for more people to vote. I'm a strong believer that we should lower the age to 16 of people to vote, because if you get people to vote, there's lots of studies at places around the world in some municipalities where people the younger you vote, the more likely you are to vote for your entire life. I think I'm very interested in ranked choice voting. There are some advantages to it. I think we should. I believe the Democrats should adopt it in Democratic primaries everywhere, so that it makes it recreates the dynamic of the Iowa caucus. The only one I want to recreate, where you want to court the supporters of your opponent. Right. I think that would help the process in a lot of ways. But the problem is changing from a two-party system is nearly impossible because of how presidential electoral votes are allocated. Basically makes it impossible for someone other than a Republican or a Democrat to win the presidency.
Cool. Let's try to get a couple more questions. Jim, and then we'll move. Oh, I'm trying to get a geographic spread, just like the Senate in 2010.
Yeah.
Jim?
A little bit of both. I mean, California is, it is a nation state in its size and its scope. And
That's right.
And it is complete, complete democratic control and, veto proof majorities, et cetera. A lot of the California has tremendous power to make real differences. Basically what California wants to do on climate really California fuel efficiency standards on cars forced the Obama administration it was basically set the standard for what we needed to do. And it changed everything, because if you can't sell cars, if you can't sell a product in California, it's not worth making it in this country. Obviously the challenge, whether it's housing or homelessness, there are a bunch of problems that Republicans love to highlight, but it's not unfair that they highlight them that we have not yet figured out. So I think it's a little bit of both. I have lived here it'll be 7 years in September. I have loved living in California. It has been a truly wonderful experience. And
Wait. I'm not liking this past tense. Yeah. What do you?
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
No,
Okay, good.
I moved. I never thought I would live in California. It never even occurred to me. I was always either living on the East Coast or sort of a campaign person.
And then you saw the sunshine.
And then I fell in love with a native of Fremont, and I moved to California. So,
okay, last question was all the way in the back, or let's just go right here. Yeah, because your hand was raised. Beat this person to the punch.
Who would need to be who would need to be in the White House for you to go back?
Ooh, a juicy question.
Stacey Abrams.
Ooh. Wow. Let's give one last round of applause to Dan Pfeiffer. Before you leave, Precious Green is going to come up on stage and talk about some really amazing upcoming events and some announcements. I want to point out that Dan and I are wearing the same brand of socks. Did you not notice? We are. I noticed first thing, but yes, we are.
I got it for Christmas.
I'm also glad that you've committed to coming here for your book launch on June 7th. That's amazing. And then one event that Precious maybe won't be announcing that I'm going to announce to all of you, which is your action item, which is a financial ask. So we haven't announced it yet, but on April 13th, the junior senator of New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, and the junior senator of New Jersey, Cory Booker, are going to both be here together for a power event. Kirsten Gillibrand, Cory Booker, Manny's. We're going to do a reception and fundraiser, and the money is all going towards strengthening and increasing the Senate majority. It's the only time I think they're going to do this year together, and it took a lot of work to get them to come together. So I'm really excited about the New York and New Jersey senators being here. They're both amazing. That event will be released soon, and I hope that if you have saved up a little bit of money over the last